Welcome to Founder Tactics, a podcast about entrepreneurs and the communities that have shaped their journey. I am your host, Julia Lucidi. On this episode, we're diving into a question every founder eventually faces. What does it really take to navigate uncertainty and build something valuable enough to exit? This conversation was recorded live at the Fort Lauderdale Tech Meetup, where we hosted a fireside chat on Boatyard's exit to MarineMax and the pivot that led to their successful acquisition. We'll hear from Nathan Heber, the founder of Boatyard, who built and sold his company in the highly fragmented marine industry right here in Fort Lauderdale, the yachting capital of the world. In this episode, we explore the realities of bootstrapping and how customer feedback can reshape an entire company. Now, before we get started, don't forget to follow and subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform you're listening to us on now. It's a tremendous help as we continue to grow this community organically. Now, let's jump in. Take us back to the beginning. What inspired you to start Boatyard, and what problem were you trying to solve in the marine industry at that time?
So Boatyard actually started from my wife bought me some sailing lessons. We were sailing around Biscayne Bay, and one day we were taking a vacation to the British Virgin Islands. We decided to do a bareboat charter and sail from island to island. We were really underqualified, but we went down there. It went amazing. It was an incredible adventure. And when I came back, I said, all right, this is the tech startup I want to build. I want to facilitate access to this for other people. And so shortly thereafter, I applied to and was accepted into the first cohort of Venture Hive, which was run by Susan and Laud and Ivan Rappin-Snip.
An accelerator.
Yeah.
In Miami.
Yeah. And then, from there, started building.
And did you have the technical skills to build an app or startup or a SaaS product?
So my wife laughs at me because I didn't have any technical skills and I wasn't in the marine industry, but I very quickly learned everything I could possibly learn, position myself for success, and to be honest, made every single mistake you could make before figuring it out.
You ended up finding a co-founder who was technical, is that correct? Or
no, I had sort of co-founder by committee. So honestly, that was maybe one of my regrets, and something, if I was going to start another startup, I would make sure that I did have a co-founder. But I had incredible mentors, investors, and technical leads at my company that formed the tech co-founder by committee to support me.
Yeah, we hear from a lot of founders here at the Tech Meetup, importance of advisors, mentors, board members, and how instrumental they can be in that journey.
It's so incredibly critical. You're going to go through some very hard times, and without those people around me, I'm not sure I would have gone through it.
Yeah. Maybe we can go into that a little bit later, but I'm curious to know, what was the initial MVP, minimum viable product? Every startup, when they are launching a product, ideally should start with something very lean, something that didn't cost them a lot of money, to kind of try to validate if the market actually wants that before you double down and go massive. Did you have an MVP?
Yes, but it wasn't in the first company that I was building. So I started out as a peer-to-peer boat rental company. And when I was in the accelerator, and halfway through the program, I realized there was a bigger opportunity in service. I'd come through 2008 in real estate and knew that the next downturn in the market, luxury businesses would suffer. And at the same time was seeing an incredible opportunity, with obtaining, getting access to marine services. So at that point, we made, our first decision to pivot and shifted into a boat services marketplace. So once we did that, we did build an MVP. And just to show you how sort of scrappy we were, it was an app that really did nothing. For the outside consumers, they were ordering all the services for their boat. But behind the scenes, we were just getting emails and calling up service providers. And so, and it was meant to be an on-demand marketplace. That was the first version of our company.
And I found that there was customer feedback for this pivot. Was this already the moment that you referenced?
So this is where it started. But really, you know, what we quickly learned is that marine services don't work for on-demand as an on-demand business. On-demand businesses need to be services that are requested often, that are time sensitive, and where there's low opportunities for leakage. So a taxi is a great example, right? You're not going to save the taxi driver's number and wait for them to be available. And I need it now and I need it often. Whereas marine services, they're very relationship based. They're intermittent. They're not as time sensitive. So we realized we needed more to the platform to keep people engaged. But at the same time, this is where we realized the big pivot was that we would get these requests for services and we would send them out to marine service providers. And then it would become a black box because they were doing business on a napkin in the back of their truck. And we couldn't deliver the level of customer experience that we wanted to because they didn't have the tools to do it and to communicate with us. So that's when we shifted our focus into SaaS.
So was the feedback coming from the service provider side? Who essentially was your client? Because there's a bit of a chicken and the egg dilemma here of the demand of services and the service provider.
Yeah, and it was a little bit from both. So the getting the supply side was never the challenge with service providers because they would always take business when we had it for them. The bigger challenge was on the demand side. However, both sides were feeling the pain when we would connect them because the customer wasn't hearing from them. So they, come to us and then we'd have to follow up. And we were just stuck in the middle of this experience and watching it on both sides. I'm going, how is it possible that, it's at that point, it was 2015. People were still doing business on paper and, they weren't really great at customer communication. They were small mom and pops. What we thought is there are great service providers out there. But everyone, growing up in Miami, I'd hear my whole life how, friends with boats couldn't find the right people. We knew they were out there. So we said, all right, well, if we curate them, build a really clean, simple UI and layer on great customer experience, we could change that. And that's what we attempted to do. But when we saw that they just didn't have the tools to manage their own businesses, we knew we had to build it for them if we ever wanted to come back to being a marketplace.
What did it look like to retain those initial customers and build out that solution?
It was a lot of faking it till you make it. We would be a concierge essentially. We would make sure we would follow up proactively with the providers before the customer would ask us about it. So we would make sure that they were getting the right experience and then we would communicate on their behalf. But you can imagine how labor intensive that is and certainly not scalable.
So in those moments, were there any moments of tension where you slipped the ball and you said, wow, we really need to make a change to make this more automated? Because I can imagine that the demands were increasing if you were doing a great job at delivering that white glove service.
Yeah, I mean, we've recognized pretty quickly that there was no way to scale it past this small operation that we had without those tools. And I remember early on, we received an order for a $40,000 repower of this boat. And I was thinking in my head, nobody knows us. There's no reason to trust us. And the industry is so challenged that somebody would come to us with that large of a job. But it was because they just had bad experiences elsewhere. The other thing was we have a religious focus on customer support and customer experience. And that carries through in our culture to this day. But then we were the only ones who would answer a chat at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night or something. So when people needed things and they couldn't reach other companies because they leave voicemails and not hear back from them, with us, they would hear back. And so we were able to start building up our first customers from that. And that formed a test kitchen where we started to understand the business better and where the opportunity was.
Where was the change or the leap that you were able to transition into more scale where it didn't feel so manual?
Really, once we focused on being a SaaS product exclusively, where we were the technology provider, we got out of providing the services completely. So then we were facilitating it for these marine businesses, but we weren't in the middle of the transaction.
How can you detail a little bit more how the platform works, that it's able to deliver such high quality customer service and experience?
For sure. So it started with simple things like digital payments, that wasn't prevalent at the time. Even the bigger companies in our space were sending out credit card authorization forms, and you couldn't order services online. I remember going to my first boat shows and I was talking to people about what we were building, and they were looking at me like I was an alien. Nobody's going to order service through an app. Nobody's going to order online. But sure enough, facilitating that process and giving them the tools to easily communicate with the customers and provide those status updates and streamline their own workflows digitally is really what started to gain traction. And that's where we saw product market fit.
How big did the company get before it was acquired?
It was really early, actually. We were pre-Series A, but we had been around for 5 years. I am a very frugal founder. So in 4 years, raised 1.2 million and made it work. Didn't take a salary for like 3 years. And so we were early, but by then we had taken our first investment from MarineMax and we were supporting their business, which allowed us to start scaling up.
You mentioned your advice being raise capital when you don't need it. How did that philosophy actually guide your fundraising strategy?
Well, I say that because I didn't do that. I needed it. There were at least 3 times we were on the verge of being, drying up because we were still figuring out product market fit in an industry that was largely ignored by VCs. And you also have to remember, this was in South Florida in 2015, 16. There was like money from rich uncles around town and Series B for med tech, but there wasn't really anything in between. So it was a tough time to, raise venture capital in South Florida, especially when, we were still figuring it out, frankly. But what I meant by that was, one, not to raise money just to raise, because I saw a lot of founders get into trouble by raising too much. And then, either having to do down rounds or just being in a position where they couldn't justify the next round's valuation. But the other thing is founders should raise when they have the leverage, when they're on the side of the table where they can, get favorable terms. And so we weren't in that position. And, I had great investors. They didn't take advantage, but, it's clearly more challenging when you're raising when you absolutely need it.
Can you share who your investors were and part of perhaps the role that they played beyond just the money?
Sure. So we had another accelerator called Thesis Ventures, which is where I met one of my mentors, John Bonhalla, who was the chief digital officer at Universal Music Group, and became a mentor for me through this whole process and through the acquisition. We raised money from Van Dutch Yachts, which was a very good partnership. For a while, I thought it was going to be impossible to raise money from the marine industry. It's just not naturally venture investors. What it turned out was that not only were they willing to invest because they understood the problem, but they were the best investors because then, we could work on it for and with them.
That's good.
They were great partners. And then we had a series of angels on our cap table, including some from the marine industry that were, instrumental in guiding me along the way.
How many people were on the team when the company was acquired?
Oh, I think we were only like 5 or 6. We were small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's impressive. I think a lot of times, perhaps even myself, I thought in the past, like, oh, you have to build this massive company for you to be acquired. But at times it can be for the technology and the team members.
Yeah. I mean, it was for all kinds of reasons. It was the right thing at the right time. But the truth is, you look at the numbers, and I remember looking this up. It was something like 97% pre-Series A companies never get acquired so we beat all the odds at the time, but it was also the right place at the right time with the right partners. We had known them for years. We had gotten into business with them, and it was just this perfect marriage of, innovation and culture on our side and scalability and industry knowledge on theirs with the resources they brought to the table. And they were just frankly good humans. So it was an easy acquisition.
It's always great to be in business with people who have great values and shared values with you. And it seems like you had that good fit with them.
That's probably the only reason that I sold out, like, exited as early as we did, because they were the right fit for us.
You mentioned having board advisors, mentors. What were some very strategic moments of the company that they made a huge difference?
Oh my goodness. There were some really difficult times. So uh, one experience I can remember is we made a deal with a facility in Puerto Rico for $500,000. And it was mind blowing for us at the time. We, just to have that deal, that partnership, that opportunity, we were going to build them a SaaS product. And then shortly after signing, we realized that it did not fit with the roadmap that we wanted to do. And we were going to be stuck in a deal that wasn't in the interest of our partners, wasn't in our interest. We had started the project, so I spent some money. And this was a really difficult decision, but I made a decision to go back to them and say, you know what, I'm going to pay you all of it back. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to go to a better partner for you. And we're going to focus on this other path that we want to take.
What about it was going to deter you? What was the focus of the project?
It was going to end up being, we were going to become an in-house dev shop for a project that wasn't really going to advance the broader, the broader company mission. And so it just, for the next 2 years, we would have been doing that. And I just didn't think we'd ever get out of it.
Wow, that's a big step back.
Yeah. So that was one very difficult moment. There were definitely difficult times where, whether it was making mistakes in development or, not the right partners, or just really trying to figure out where our next round was going to come from. That people like John, who I mentioned earlier, having him as a sounding board and a mentor got me through some really challenging times.
That's great. The company was then acquired by MarineMax in early 2020, a couple of weeks before COVID. We can talk about that, what that meant for the company. And I don't know how many people here know, but when COVID hit, the yachting and boating industry blew up in a way that the market didn't know or expect. I know this because my husband works in yachting. And what an interesting time for the company to be acquired.
Yeah, it was actually kind of funny because in the stocks app, it showed a press release from MarineMax acquiring us, and then the stock like tripled. And so we used to joke that it was because of our acquisition.
Now, how was it negotiating that acquisition right before COVID? Like, there are implications, right? And what were those implications? Why was it good or bad for you?
It was really interesting because, obviously the industry took off. So you can look back, and I never do this because I think what you make the best decision for the company at the time, and you don't reconsider those things. But, you could look at it either way. The industry did blow up. So maybe there would have been an opportunity further down the line. But at the same time, it was COVID and everybody was pulling back and nobody knew what was going to happen. It was a very volatile time. So having stability and the timing was, incredible. So we could really focus on building. What changed was, when we were acquired, our mission was to start scaling Boatyard, and we quickly had to shift into a little bit of helping our parent company or working with them on digital transformation for a little while.
For the company as a whole.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about how you built this relationship with MarineMax, because the truth is, in a sense, they were kind of a competitor.
Yeah. Yeah, in a sense. So obviously I wanted them as a partner a lot more than they wanted me. But no, it's an interesting story. So going back to John, he facilitated a meeting with the then president, our now CEO, Brett McGill, at the Miami Boat Show. I believe it was 2016, maybe 2016, I believe. And at the time, I had the opportunity to show him what we were building. And I showed him the app, and he liked it. He was very kind and very polite and magnanimous with his time. And he said, we're building our own app. This is great what you're doing. Keep it up. Let's stay in touch. And they went on their way, right? Cut to 3 or 4 years later, I think it was 3 years later, I ran into Brett at another boat show at Fort Lauderdale show. And this was, I guess, 2018 or 19. And I showed him what we built with our SAS. And at the time, they had been working with an overseas development shop agency and just didn't get the results that they wanted. So they had a decision to make at the time, do we invest in getting our app where we need it to be? Or, it seems like Boatyard's built a good product here. Do we invest with them and white label what they're doing? And to Brett's credit, he made a decision to invest in us. And it was great because we got to bring our expertise to this big, larger company, and they became our largest investor at the time. And we immediately got access to the largest test kitchen in marine and started building a product for them.
That's a phenomenal opportunity that you guys had just through relationship building, exchanging ideas, and eventually bringing them on as an investor, a majority investor. Is that right?
Majority of they had a minority of the company, but yeah, they were the largest. They were the largest investor.
The largest investor from all those investors.
On our cow table, yes. And it just goes to show you, like, we planted a seed years earlier, and you never know. And it was all these years later that, it paid off.
And how was the negotiation process?
It was actually remarkably simple and fair and straightforward. I worked directly with my current mentor there. Sean Burke is their chief digital officer at MarineMax. And we really hashed out one-to-one, man-to-man, and we're very transparent with our needs and concerns and considerations. And it all started because I went to them for another round of funding because it came time to raise my next round. And as a courtesy, I went to our largest investor first and said, hey, this is what I think we're going to need. And that's when Sean and I sat down and he said, maybe it's time for you to come under our umbrella. And right fit, right time, good, really great synergies between both companies. And it just made sense. We needed to scale, and they provided the resources, expertise, and reach, and industry knowledge, of course.
I feel like a lot of times entrepreneurship can be really glamorized. Like, the cool thing to do is to be a founder. And it's pretty hard, in my opinion. And the moment that you decided to move forward with acquisition, were you also ready to transition to a different lifestyle, like not the founder lifestyle?
I know my wife was ready for me to transition to a different lifestyle. At that point, when I started Boatyard, I had no kids, but I did have legacy businesses that were still generating revenue. But now we're, 5 years in, I'm taking a very small salary, really committed to this. But now I think we had our third kid by then, our third son. And, the math was changing, life was changing, and it was mostly lifestyle. I worked for 5 years at least, 6.5 days, 10, 12-hour days, very few breaks, was really, really committed to it night and day. And it just, the benefit of having a semi-normal life, plus it was really mostly about what it would do for the company. I felt like I was doing the math and, we could have raised another round and 3x, 4x our valuation. But, you also can have a lot of things go wrong, like COVID hit 3 weeks later, so it just made sense at that time for us. And so, I made the, I guess, difficult decision in that it's your baby, but it was they were the right stewards to take it into its next era.
Tell us a little bit more about your role at MarineMax now as president of Boatyard. How has your focus shifted?
So it's really wonderful working at the company. I spent the better part of my adult life running away from a corporate job, so it was a little bit scary at first, but they've to their credit, when MarineMax acquires a boat dealership or a business from other owners, they'll often keep the leadership in place and let them run it the way that they know to run it, because, those people know the business best. And so even though we have dealerships and marinas and businesses all over the world at this point, there's a lot of independence for the business leaders. Um, and also like just incredible support coming out of the leadership team. So while it became this great hybrid where, we have the resources of a public company, but the culture of a startup. And then, because at the time, we were the first venture acquisition and really the only ones at the time building ground up software technology products within the company. We got to work on a lot of different interesting products. And to this day, now we've grown the team manyfold and we're working on multiple products within the company.
That's good. Community seems to have played a big role in your journey as a founder. Could you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. Again, 2015, 2016, Miami Tech, like we fit in a room this big, but it was a very supportive community. Nancy Dahlberg putting out articles every week on different company that she would spotlight and support and help. And then you had, people like Susan started Venture Hive, and, just downtown there started to build in Miami a burgeoning tech community. And this is obviously pre-COVID, everything pre-great migration. And so the community was it was really small, but really caring and supportive. And so it was just a great time to be in tech here, other than, the infrastructure wasn't there. So it was a little bit of a grind, but it was very fun.
Yeah. So for founders that today want to innovate in the marine industry, being that it is a very traditional, fragmented still in many ways, do you have any advice for where to start?
Yes. And this is true not just of the marine industry. This is true of any legacy business or industry. One thing that we've learned is the technology is the easy part. The change management and people are way harder than the text. So building tools that, improve workflows, generate more revenue, improve customer experience, but do it without requiring significant change management on the part of the stakeholders will increase your chances of success. And then now, obviously we're entering the age of AI. I'm very jealous. I don't know how many of you are starting or are new founders and starting companies and running companies. But
Raise your hand if you're a founder so he can see.
It's incredible. Yeah, I'm jealous of all of you. Because, what we built for all that time and money, now in a few months with the right resources, you can approximate, right? So all those, fake it till you make it MVPs that we were building, even then, back then, it would still took us months and dollars.
Now you can buy code out.
You can buy code in the weekends. Yeah. I saw, these kids I consult, I try to mentor other entrepreneurs, and they came to me with this dashboard they built in a weekend for $500. And it was like as nice as something we had built for when we launched our business. And I was just like, oh, so jealous that they were able to do it. But it's a great, exciting time to be, starting any company, really.
And it's awesome that you still love to pour into entrepreneurs. I think that once you've been through the trenches, this is what I see with a lot of founders. You're willing to give back. You're willing to show up, speak at a tech meetup because it's out of that drive to want to support other founders.
That's a big part of it. And also I remember what I was going through and how much it helped me when I would have somebody who had been through it or something, who could share a nugget of advice. And I don't know, what I have to offer, but whatever it is, I'm happy to do it.
That's good. Are you ready to transition to questions from our audience?
Of course.
Okay, great.
Nathan, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Very inspiring. A few questions on your revenue model. I know you do SaaS fees and commercial processing fees. Do you charge a percentage of revenue on services, and can you go in a little bit more detail on that?
So yes, and thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. when we first launched the marketplace, we tried that model of taking a percentage of what we generated because we figured, well, we're not going to ask them for any money up front. We'll just take the percent. Their margins are so small, our service providers, that like they really don't have it to give to SaaS. And once we pivoted into SaaS years ago, we abandoned that model completely. And now we're strictly subscription plus, some revenue from transactions. But we feel that also aligns everyone's interest because, they're not being penalized for being more successful. So, we're all rowing in the same direction.
One more quick follow-up, quick question. So I know MarineMax has hundreds, thousands of locations across the U.S. And so in terms of like when you started out, like when you were getting leads in other territories besides the service providers that you've had access to, how did you get through that?
So that was actually the most fun part when we started, signing that service provider in Hawaii or Canada or wherever, but once we were a SaaS product, it didn't matter. We didn't have to be there. We figured out ways to train them, to onboard them remotely. And so, now we're signing people in Europe, anywhere that can use our software.
I know you mentioned that you're really excited about the age of AI and you're still in the corporate world, but we would have to go back to start a company in this day of age. How would you think about the idea and what would you do differently from last time?
It's a great question. So it's actually not different than what we're doing internally at Boatyard right now, which is we identify the pain point that we're trying to solve. We then ideate on what, feature would be the most elegant way to solve that problem. We document it. We then consult with our customers to see if we're on the right track and get their initial feedback. Then we take that and we immediately now with AI can go to a prototype. And so we'll build features for Boatyard outside of Boatyard so we don't have to take up our engineering time. We'll build the feature, we'll show it. Right now, we're working on a feature to automate status updates to customers because it's most businesses don't do it well, proactively communicate. And part of the reason is it's time consuming. And so instead of taking an hour at the end of the day to go track everybody down on the work that they've completed, put together the updates, send them to customers, we're getting real-time feedback, real-time insights from the field, using that to dynamically create those status updates. Well, we're doing all of this outside of Boatyard. We're getting feedback from our customers on how they're using it. And then once we're clear on what that scope will be, we build it into the product. So I would do that whether I was starting a company tomorrow or, in a legacy business.
Since we brought up AI, I was wondering, number one, what you guys are doing with AI right now, right? It's not coming, it's here. We're already deep in it. But secondly, I was at an event here a couple of weeks ago. Michael Bertha was talking about how AI has changed a lot of the assumptions that we had in business all across the board, right? And it's just sped everything up. It's decreased costs. It's increased speed to market, things like that. And I'm wondering what assumptions that you had then that you would look at differently now based on AI.
That's a good question. I don't know if it's I look at assumptions differently, but I look at how we work differently. So like, for example, internally, we're changing all our processes. So like whether it's intranet so that we share knowledge within the company without, having to look in multiple different places for it, or creating processes internally for onboarding, for and report generation analytics. We use it to analyze our marketing efforts. Everything internally where we can streamline our own processes, we use it. But there's a feature I'm working on right now that I've had in my head for 6 years. I knew what I wanted to build, what was going to solve the problem. But the reason I didn't build it was it was going to be a very big lift, and it was going to require a lot of change management from the stakeholders. And it didn't feel like the adoption was going to be there because of the effort they would have had to make it work. Well, now with the emergence of AI, it's going to do that work for them. So we're building the feature. And we did a prototype in 2 weeks. So it's just game changing in terms of, how we think about with our internal processes and our external product. Plus, as a SaaS product, you really have to be shifting to an AI first strategy. And if you're not, your competitor is, and you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Thank you.
Obviously, you have that a success that was combined with multiple factors, right? Like your investors were the fit, your partners, you had a great team, and obviously you had the ability to sustain yourself for 3 years, right? So my question is, what would you name like 3 major skill sets or abilities of the founder that brought you to that early exit and success? That what you say, like these are the core things that you need to have to do this.
Yeah, that is a great question. Number one, without question, like irrational stubbornness. Most people would fold. You guys are all building companies. You know what you're going through. You know what your friend cohort is like. You know that many of them, if they have faced some of the adversity you're facing, would not break through the wall. So just, being stubborn about it and doing it because you love it. You all could make more money doing something else. The average exit for founders, I mean, they make, I don't know, it's something like, it comes out to something like $400,000 a year or something that these Stanford grads would make doing anything else. So without any risk. So, you really have to love the journey, not just, the money, because again, the money's not guaranteed in any way. And then, the other thing that I think doesn't get enough credit is just not being dogmatic. Like, you need to feel strongly about your positions, but not be so dogmatic that you're not willing to change in the face of evidence telling you to go in a different direction. And so, for those people who are like, no, hold a junk shop, this is what I'm doing, it's the wrong path, doesn't always end well.
Very much enjoyed your conversation this evening. And I wanted to just for a moment step back because you just talked about frugality, but that relates back to relationships and the relationship with your wife. I'm sure there were times that were incredible stress. How would you counsel other entrepreneurs through those mountaintops and valleys in terms of how they maintain and preserve their relationships with their spouse, with their children, because that's an important facet of success as well. If you have money, but you don't have a strong family and a strong relationship, it's not worth much, is it?
None at all. You're 100% right. And to be honest, like, she's the secret to all of it. Had my wife not been supportive of it, there's no way this happens. So I know it's going to sound cliche, but communication, you have to be transparent with each other. If one of you are going through tough times, you have to be able to talk to the other one so you're not bottling it up, because then it shows up somewhere else in a much more negative way, right? But having a supportive partner, whoever that partner is, as you go through this is, invaluable, because you're going to go through difficult times and you need that support layer. Even my in-laws, who I know are not probably that excited about it, pretended outwardly to be supportive of it.
I wanted to ask you, Nathan, about your experience during that phase where you were kind of the back end of everything. And it was kind of like, hey, there's this front end user interface, but I'm just got a hamster shop in the back, just a bunch of hamster spinning wheels.
Yeah.
But what was it like within your frugality, managing your pricing, your burn, your sweat equity? How was that? And your runway, of course. How was all that logicked out as you were going through the months of trying to say, hey, tech's going to eventually come and replace us from this, but still, you have a finance house problem month for month.
Yeah, it's another very good question. You're really figuring it out, like, building the plane as you fly it a little bit. So I wish I could say it was like there was some grandmaster strategy. One thing I did do that I never regretted was giving equity early to talented people that were, committed to the cause. Because, then I had that support layer. And I think as a leader, that's your job, is to find like really quality people and help them reach their potential, more than me spending 6.5 days, which I did. But rather than being an example, you should really do this, those people up. So anyway, to answer your question, that part of our existence was more just trying to find out if there was a business there, right? Are people going to order? I remember, and my wife jokes about this too, like I would stare at the computer screen, like waiting for the orders to come in. And I was like, maybe I'm just like going down the wrong road here. And then like suddenly 1, and then 2, and 5, it happens.
It's crazy. Everything that you said so far has resonated so much with me because I've been building my business now for going on 14 years. I'm at a point now where with AI, a lot of the ideas are now coming into fruition. As far as the technology, I had ideas 14 years ago to start selling cars 100% online, but new cars. So similar to Carvana, a new car platform. And now we're finally able to make it happen. At what point and how did you decide this is the right time now to bring in money? Because we self-funded ourselves this entire, over 13, 14 years now. And now it's kind of like we have something amazing. Everyone around us saying it's amazing. But to really get it out to the masses, I feel like it's time to take money, but we've never done it before. So it's also something new. It's a little scary.
Yeah, it is scary, and it is tough to find, to decide when that right time is. But how I think about it, I mean, if you're a venture investor, you want to invest when you believe that there's this fire and you're pouring fuel on the fire. This is going to happen with or without you, and it's just going to happen faster with your money. So if you're at that point that you're like, look, the only thing holding me back is scale, is our resources. Like this is all working in some microcosm of what I want to build. Then I would say absolutely the right time, throw and don't let somebody pass you by. But if it's, if you're still, if the unit economics are not quite there yet, or product market fit's not quite there yet, you might want to keep going.
One of the challenges in our industry, specifically for the service, is that even when companies do train technicians, a lot of them are technicians. They're not entrepreneurs. So the service that's being provided is not from an entrepreneur that's looking to establish specific standards for long-term. There's a few of those are very valuable. So for your product, in order for you to get that buy-in from what's a pulverized and really not naturally entrepreneurial kind of, labor force, what did you find was like the hook or the worm for the hook? Or if not trying to be too graphic, but
No, I mean, you know the industry well, and you're absolutely nailing it. The biggest challenge is that, right? Like the most important data is coming from the field, and technicians are not tech savvy. So one piece of it was building an app that was dead simple to use for the technicians. But the first, I won't curse on the podcast, but the first AI tool that we built was to rewrite tech notes. And because you can imagine the text would say, this boat looks like, whatever, who's taking care of this boat? I got out here and I'm not working on this thing.
read that.
And then we have an AI assistant that goes, I arrived at the boat and it's in suboptimal condition. And that's what goes out to the customer. So like, you have to know who your end user is. And I talk to the team now and I'm like, if I had to do anything over again, we built it to be even simpler. And things that we built that are like click, click, click forms to fill out, we're changing to voice now because we're just like, how do you make it even easier? And that goes back to the change management piece and the that I was mentioning earlier. And like, if you're going to ask them to do something that's not part of their core job, it's got to be so dead simple to get real adoptions. Thank you.
I'm in the process of building an ecosystem for early stage SaaS founders who are building alone or small teams. And your marketplace problem is the same problem I have, where the supply is easy, but the founder demand is a little more challenging. So how kind of tactics did you use or any kind of insights into getting that demand while you're simultaneously growing the supply side?
What's the marketplace?
It's for early stage SaaS founders to get advice, help, hire SaaS.
So your challenge is getting the founders?
Yes.
Okay.
So what I have been focusing mainly on supply, and now I'll switch to the founder side.
Now you're switching to founder side. So, one thing is remove all friction for founders to join, right? If that's your challenge on the marketplace, don't charge them. Like charge someone else and sponsors, whoever. Just remove every barrier for them to join and then incentivize them to join in some way. Julia was talking about access, right? If you're going to participate here and share your information, then you're going to get something for it. Like that's a brilliant tactic for, building community. So what can you offer those founders that they're maybe not getting somewhere else that will bring them to your marketplace?
After your acquisition, I guess about 6 years ago now, how much did Boatyard's mission start to widen into other things outside of the original lane, becoming more of a broad technology company doing other things for MarineMax?
Well, for one thing, there was COVID, right? So immediately we were thrust into, hey, how can we sell virtually? How can we sell online or help our parent company do those things, right? So we built out like the first virtual tours of the yachts and boats for them and digital, online payments and online deposits for boats. And again, more digital transformation, experimental projects, post-COVID. But longer term, like now we're building out all kinds of product for our parent company, and then as a SaaS company selling to the industry, which is also, I should say, one of the reasons I exited to MarineMax, because they were, I said to them, well, I don't really want to be an in-house dev shop. And they said, no, we insist you sell to our competitors. Like they wanted to grow this as a division within the company. And so that was yet another reason to come on board. But to answer your question about other products, wherever, we are working right now on a product internally for the yachting division, and then a sales module to extend Boatyard's SaaS platform. And that all of this supports our parent company, but also supports the broader industry.
I have a question. I'm not sure if this ties into the Boatyard business, but was there a way to quantify customer satisfaction equating to more boat sales? And was that, would that add a value to your program?
In terms of satisfaction, yeah, the service experience directly ties to, there's the old expression in marine, sales sells the first boat, service sells the rest, right? And it's like you're building that relationship. Those are the touch points. I remember the founder of he spoke at one of our corporate events, but Horst Schulze, the founder of Ritz, used to say the first 3 interactions set the tone of the relationship for the entire trip, right? And so if someone buys a boat or a yacht from you and then goes for their first service and they're leaving voicemails and they're not hearing from anybody and it's taking 4 weeks longer than they said it was and the parts not in stock and all this stuff, inevitably they're going to be talking to their cousin who says, I have a friend who will fix your boat for cheaper. You should come to me. And then that friend sells them the next boat, right? So maintaining that relationship through the line and through all their future interactions with the brands is critical. But as you know, the teams don't have the resources or the time. They're extremely busy to deliver that level of customer experience, right? Not without help. So that's where Boatyard comes in. We want to build them the tools that either help them do it or do it for them in the perfect world.
All right, we're going to take one last question for Europa.
What are some creative marketing or advertising strategies for user acquisition that maybe guerrilla marketing, or don't really get to see you guys at the boat shows too much? So what are you kind of doing for that?
So I'll tell you a story of our first boat show experience. So I was trying to convince the boat show. This was again 2015, 16. There was I was like, you need to have a startup pavilion and help us grow into people who will exhibit, right? Because we can't afford it now, but carve out a little section. And they were there were 3 of us. They weren't doing it. And we couldn't afford to go to the show at the time. And it really wouldn't have paid off given where we were as a product. So we rented a golf cart, like one of these electric golf carts, wrapped it, and drove people from the show to the ferry. And we had cookies in the car and a Boatyard horn. So it just was obnoxious. And then we'd give them water, and when they'd be like, well, what do you charge? And we'd say, you have Delaware out. That was the cost of the ride. So, we did just laps all day long until we got, enough people. And so for the people who were spending $10,000, $20,000 at the show, we were getting more attention at the time. I don't think that would fly today, but they let us do it at the time.
That was another episode of Founder Tactics. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to get updates on new episodes, live recordings, and everything happening in our founder community, make sure to subscribe, follow, and rate the podcast. And also, you can head to foundertactics.com to learn more about our work. See you next time.